Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the most famous rises and, quite frankly, one of the most dramatic falls in all of corporate history. Now, if you grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, Friday nights probably meant one very specific thing: wandering those brightly lit blue and yellow aisles of your local Blockbuster video, just hoping to snag a new release before they were all totally gone. It was an absolute cultural staple. But today, well, the reality for this iconic brand is incredibly stark.
Okay, let's dive into this. 1. Out of the thousands upon thousands of locations that used to anchor strip malls literally all over the globe, there is exactly one franchised Blockbuster store left on Earth. Just one. It's located in Bend, Oregon, and today it practically operates as a nostalgic tourist destination rather than a neighborhood video shop. Which brings us to the ultimate question we're answering today. How did a multi-billion-dollar empire with over 9,000 locations end up with just a single store? I mean, how does an unstoppable retail giant just vanish into thin air? It's a tragic corporate narrative, really. And to understand the fall, we absolutely have to start with their phenomenal rise.
So let's get into it. Section 1. Building a Video Rental Empire.
The story kicks off in 1985. Blockbuster was founded by David Cook down in Dallas, Texas. Now, here's a fun fact. Cook wasn't a Hollywood insider at all. He actually had a background in database technology, originally supplying software to the oil and gas industry. When he pivoted over to video rentals, that database expertise drove some massive early operational innovation. The very first store opened with a huge inventory of 8,000 VHS and 2,000 beta tapes. Using his advanced database systems, Cook could actually custom tailor a store's inventory to its specific neighborhood based on local demographics, which was completely revolutionary at the time.
But the real hypergrowth, that started in 1987 when Waste Management co-founder Wayne Huizenga stepped into the picture. Huizenga originally had his reservations about the video rental industry, but he saw the incredible efficiency of the model. He took Ray Kroc's McDonald's franchise model and applied it for rapid, aggressive expansion. The idea spread like wildfire. He bought up major rivals like Major Video and Errol's, and get this, at their absolute peak of expansion, Blockbuster was opening a new store every 24 hours. I mean, think about that volume.
Now, what's really interesting about this model is the brilliant revenue-sharing blueprint that fueled their total dominance, which was actually pioneered by Viacom's Sumner Redstone. Traditionally, video stores had to pay a massive flat fee, sometimes up to $100 just for one VHS tape. Because of that, mom-and-pop stores could only afford one or two copies of a hit movie. But Blockbuster completely changed the game. They struck a deal to obtain videos for very little upfront cost. In exchange, they kept 60% of the rental fee and gave the remaining 40% back to the studios. This allowed them to buy tapes in just incredible volumes.
And that sheer volume became their absolute core strategy. Because they could afford so many tapes, they stocked massive quantities of popular new releases. No more waiting weeks to see a Blockbuster hit. They secured exclusive contracts to get movies before anyone else. Plus, they explicitly pushed a wholesome home entertainment image by refusing to stock adult films, making them a trusted family favorite. Add to that their brilliant store layout, shelving titles sparsely so the front covers were fully visible, and it made it incredibly easy for customers to just casually browse. They literally overwhelmed the competition with their selection.
Naturally, this total market dominance caught the eye of some massive media conglomerates. In 1994, Viacom acquired Blockbuster for a staggering $8.4 billion. That is an absolute mountain of cash. Viacom actually used this massive cash machine of a company to help finance its historic bid for Paramount Pictures. So Blockbuster wasn't just a local video store anymore, it was a global media heavyweight.
And that monumental acquisition perfectly introduces Section 2, the golden era of Blockbuster.
And this brilliantly illustrates the scale we're talking about. From a single, humble store in Dallas in 1985, Blockbuster exploded to a staggering 9,094 stores by the year 2004. At this peak, they employed over 84,000 people worldwide. It's been claimed that more than 43 million U.S. households had Blockbuster memberships. They were, for all intents and purposes, completely invincible.
But, as we know, invincibility is a dangerous illusion in business. We really have to pivot now to the cautionary part of our explainer. What happens when an unstoppable giant ignores the future? What happens when a company gets so comfortable with its current success that it refuses to see the cliff it's walking right toward? Well, let's look at the internal missteps and external competitors that began to tear this giant apart from the inside out.
Moving right along to Section 3, the Netflix and late fee threat.
Let's go back in time for a second to the year 2000. Netflix was just a fledgling DVD by mail service, and honestly, they were struggling. They approached Blockbuster with an offer: buy us out for just $50 million. Blockbuster literally laughed them out of the room. They completely passed on the opportunity. The dramatic irony here is just painful. By passing on a $50 million investment, Blockbuster basically dug its own multi-billion-dollar grave.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the contrast between these two models was incredibly stark. Blockbuster was entirely shackled to physical locations, limited by geography, and, worst of all, heavily reliant on charging customers late fees to turn a profit. Netflix, on the other hand, they had a highly efficient DVD by mail service, a massive centralized library that didn't take up expensive retail real estate, and, crucially, zero late fees. Netflix fundamentally solved the biggest customer pain point that Blockbuster was actually depending on.
So, feeling the heat, Blockbuster tried to react. In 2005, they launched this massive No More Late Fees advertising campaign. It sounded amazing, right? But it was a total disaster. Here's the catch. If you kept a movie past 8 days, Blockbuster automatically charged your account the full purchase price of the movie. You could return it for a refund, sure, but they still tacked on a restocking fee. It caused massive customer confusion and intense anger. Over 40 state attorneys general ended up suing Blockbuster for false advertising. It cost the company millions in refunds and, even worse, severely damaged their customer trust.
Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the company was basically at war with itself. CEO John Antioco recognized the digital threat and launched Total Access, a program allowing online DVD rentals to be exchanged for free movies in-store. And you know what? It was actually working. It slowed Netflix's growth significantly. But it was expensive, costing Blockbuster about $2 every time a free movie was claimed. So, in 2007, an infamous boardroom battle broke out. Activist shareholder Carl Icahn fought back against these expensive online initiatives and successfully pushed Antioco right out the door.
Enter the new CEO, James Keyes, who took the reins in 2007. Keyes took one look at the expensive online strategy and completely reversed course. He actually rejected another buyout proposal from Netflix. He killed the Total Access free movie deal because it was losing money. He raised online DVD rental prices. And, in a massive miscalculation, he abandoned digital growth to double down on enhancing the brick-and-mortar stores. He genuinely thought they could out-retail the internet.
The financial result of these decisions? Devastating. Blockbuster was just hemorrhaging cash, losing digital market share rapidly, and still carrying the immense overhead of thousands of physical stores. By the fall of 2010, they were crushed under a crippling $900 million debt load. They simply couldn't survive it. Which brings us to the agonizing final crawl toward corporate collapse.
Section 4. Bankruptcy and Final Fade-Out.
In September 2010, totally unable to service their massive debt and getting absolutely hammered by Netflix and Redbox kiosks, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Fast forward to 2011, satellite provider Dish Network bought the remaining assets at auction for just $320 million. And by early 2014, Dish pulled the plug on the retail experiment entirely, closing all 300 remaining corporate-owned Blockbuster stores in the U.S. The giant had finally, officially fallen.
Now, it's worth noting that Dish Network did briefly try to salvage the brand. They had plans to build a Netflix competitor and even launch the Blockbuster Movie Pass, which combined streaming with discs by mail. But the catch was it was restricted only to Dish TV subscribers. At the same time, they were aggressively shuttering unprofitable retail locations. This digital hybrid approach just never caught on, and Dish ended up scrapping the Netflix competitor plans entirely by October 2012.
Which brings our explainer full circle today. While the corporate entity died out, a few privately owned franchises hung on by a thread for a few more years. But by August 2018, all of them had closed except for one. That lone surviving franchise store in Bend, Oregon that we mentioned right at the start stands today as a quirky time capsule of a bygone era of retail. So, the crucial point is perfectly summarized by former marketing executive Jonathan Salem Baskin. He said, "Digital would have changed Blockbuster's business for sure, but it wasn't its killer. That credit belongs to Blockbuster itself." And he hit the nail on the head. Blockbuster's demise wasn't just an accident of technology. It was a self-inflicted failure to adapt when the warning signs were flashing bright red. Which leaves us with a final question for you to consider. In a world of constant, rapid technological disruption, is your focus on building the future, or are you just trying to protect the past? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.